Raise your hand again if you would like to be able to take some of the insights that you've learned today and actually make them into tangible action plans to improve your business when you need it. Raise your hand again. Great. Well, hopefully, today's session will give you a few more insights which you can actually use and take forward into your outsourcing relationships and deals going forward. Now, in the short time that we have today, I really want to make sure that you guys are getting the maximum value out of what I'm saying. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to keep kind of touching base and just checking in with you by asking you to raise your hands or say yes or no. So I just know that I'm kind of still being understood and that you guys are getting the maximum value out of it. Is that okay with you guys for us to kind of do that? Yes, okay, so let's just try that. So we're okay? Everybody raise your hand. Okay, brilliant. More than that, okay, let's do that again. Raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Brilliant. Great. Superb. Great. Well, maybe you're here today because you are struggling with an outsourced relationship that just feels like it's hard work. Or potentially you are a procurement manager and you are trying to make sure that a procurement or an outsource you're planning is going to be successful. Or maybe you are dealing with the standard set of cost reduction targets, but you want to try and actually maximize the performance you get while still delivering cost savings. Or maybe you're actually from an outsourced provider and you want to try and deliver a truly successful outsourced relationship for one of your clients. Now, imagine a future where you could have an outsourced relationship which actually had in its very DNA the capabilities to add real value to your business. Imagine also having a sourcing relationship and a procurement plan which you knew was going to deliver a long-term result. And imagine also having to not trade your personal time for project success. Imagine what you'd be able to do with the spare time that you had. Now, also, potentially having everything. Having lower cost, better service, and a better relationship with your business. And I think probably most importantly, imagine a future where you could have a legacy that the outsourced relationship you create and you create today actually has a long-term, lasting impact on the performance of your overall business. Now, if you read reports from, say, ISG or Gartner, you'll know that between 50 and 65% of all outsourced deals today fail to make it to term, which is a shocking statistic. Also, according to Horses for Sources, 75% of people who have recently outsourced believe that beyond getting cost savings, the other promised value that they were supposed to gain has never materialized. So how do we focus a modern outsourcing relationship to make sure we gain those kind of values that we spoke about a second ago? Because clearly, to get from where you are today to where you want to be in the future, you need to be able to maybe gain new insights and new approaches that will help you to quickly and efficiently plan and manage a modern outsource. Now, I believe that now is more important than ever to be able to quickly and with speed and direction move and gain a new outsourcing perspective. The reason, as you probably all aware, is the tsunami of change which is affecting all of us. Last year alone, more patents were filed in the US Patent Office than the year before it and all the years before it to 1753 when the Patent Office opened. The stratospheric growth of new ideas and technology that we're experiencing today is only set to increase over the next 5 to 6 years. So it's vital that in a world where your relationship with cloud technologies and as-a-service technologies means that the role of internal IT changes, and also with the growth of gem wires and their changing needs and demands upon what an outsourced deal needs to provide in terms of mobility, in terms of social sharing, and the ability to change the way workforces work. Combined also, I think, with the speed and rate of change means that today it's vital that you can create a modern outsourced relationship which actually can adapt and grow with those changes. So, before I start, I'll just tell you a little bit about me. My name is Anthony Lamoureux. I am Director of the Enterprise Transformation Consultancy Velocity. But if you were with me about July of 2012, you would have been in a room about half this size, modern, white walls, with a window looking out on a very hypnotic sight of plane after plane landing on the single busiest runway in the world. At the time, I was Deputy CIO, Head of IT Service Delivery, and Head of Transformation for Gatwick Airport. And after a career with Fujitsu Services of around 10 years as a program manager, finally I suddenly wondered whether or not I'd bitten off more than I could chew. About a month beforehand, the newly appointed CIO for Gatwick, Michael Ibbotson, had accepted my plans to radically change the IT service strategy for the airport, where we were going to bring service management, service desk capabilities on the campus for the first time ever in its history. But to do that, I had to re-tender 11 different service lots, from everything from data centers through applications through service desk and service management. I had to select new tools like ServiceNow, and I had to use and implement new processes. And also on top of that, I had to exit out 2 incumbent suppliers, and I had only 5 months to do all of this in. Now, that's a quite scary moment. Now, I knew that for me to do that quickly and efficiently, I couldn't rely upon just making mistakes in my skills. I needed to get expertise and help so I could get through that process as fast as possible, which is why I then turned to the Independent Advisory Network and its chairman, Stephen Ashley, who's just here. And Stephen and I worked previously at Cooperative Financial Services in Manchester, and I knew that Stephen's sourcing expertise would be vital in helping me through that process. Now, if we fast forward, not only did we successfully recover the tender process and launch this strategy, but within a space of only 9 months, we had managed the outsource, run the transition, built an internal new team of 23 roles, saved Gatwick 12% of its yearly OPEX target, and we'd raised, in my opinion, the most important measure, the Net Promoter Score, which is the judge of internal IT 95 to plus 35 in only 9 months. Now, Stephen and I then took this same approach and these techniques, and we then applied them to other organisations, including Trinity Mirror Newspaper Group, where again we managed and recovered a 102p staff to a Romanian outsourcing firm, and again we saved their business around 33% of their IT OPEX targets within a year, an additional 2 million in the first year, and we also significantly improved the performance of IT within only a year. But we did all of the transition in, again, only 6 months. Now, what I'm going to share with you today is some of the techniques and approaches that we use to try and implement a modern outsourcing relationship, which gives these kind of levels of success. Now, I don't have time to probably go through everything to the detail I'd like to. Hopefully some of the other topics we can talk about this afternoon in our roundtable event. But what I want to try and do is highlight to you some of the key approaches that I think make a massive difference to the success of any outsourced relationship. Now, the first one of the needs that I want to share with you is the need to make a business impact. I think one of the true ways in which you can lock the success of an outsourced relationship and an outsourced contract is to make sure that you've aligned it to your strategy. Now, as you're probably aware, IT as an overall cost to a business ranks between 2.5% and 5% on average in most businesses. Therefore, an IT outsource deal and relationship which only focuses on reducing the cost of IT is going to have a maximum between, say, 1.5% and 2% impact on your overall business. If you can get an IT outsource contract which doesn't just focus on reducing the cost of IT, but is truly transformative, you can then make an impact on the other 95% of your business's costs. And that's where you can gain some real savings and real performance improvements. Now, this isn't necessarily easy, and I think we probably spoke about it before in a couple of the forums. Certainly David spoke about it. You have to try and align your sourcing strategy with your overall business strategy and your IT strategy. Now, it may come as no real surprise to you that in the majority of the businesses we go to, though, those things maybe aren't either aligned or don't exist. So what do you do in a short space of time for your particular requirement or sourcing deal so that you can move through those points? It can often seem that basically your outsource deal is a little bit lost at sea. What we do within Velocity is we create a model called a target operating model, or TOM. And this effectively gives you a lighthouse point of where you're strategically aiming your service to go over the next maybe 2, 3, or 4 years. It's giving you a direction, not necessarily the fixed path, but the key thing about building a target operating model is it allows you to plot some of the danger areas between you and that target. Which things from either a market performance basis, technology risks, people risks, are areas that you need to be wary of when you're planning your outsource deal, so you don't make short-term decisions that may have a long-term impact on the quality of your deal and your relationship. I think the other key thing that we use the target operating model for is we use it to be able to plot strategically what things are important to your business, be that from which assets or people, which services, which processes should remain within your business, which ones are actually ready and right to outsource today, or which ones actually require you to transform them before you make them ready and fit for outsource. And often actually with a target operating model design that we do, the answer isn't necessarily always outsource. At Gatwick, for example, because of the nature of the problem that we were trying to solve there, the answer was actually to insource certain services. And I think it's important to be able to bear that in mind in terms of the way you design your service. So I think it's vital that you, whenever you're planning an outsource, the first thing you've got to try and do is to make sure that your outsource relationship is strategically aligned. Now, the second point I think that we've just started to talk about at the end of the session before this is the need to select the right partner. Now, that sounds obvious, but actually it's one of the hardest tasks to actually do within any sourcing deal. So I think that sourcing and your approach to sourcing is key to the long-term success of your outsourced deal. Now, the approaches to sourcing, as you probably know, are quite varied. There's a multitude of different approaches of how you can quickly and effectively get through outsourcing and get through your procurement phase. And it can be quite bewildering as to which processes and approaches to use, especially as they keep changing. As technologies and the sourcing market itself matures, those approaches change too. And I know the pressures can often be that if you don't do outsourcing of the major deals on a regular basis, you might be doing them every 2, 3, 4 years, the market moves on. Which is why I believe in using a coach to be able to assist and help me get the latest skills and advice. And that's why, certainly in Velocity, we work with the likes of Advisory Connect, but we also are an affiliate member of the Independent Advisory Network, because we like to call upon the skills of people like Mark and Stephen, who do this day in, day out. Because I believe that through the Independent Advisory Network, we've probably got access to probably some of the best advisors that there are in the business today. But regardless of your approach to get there, I think one of the key things to understand is that any outsource provider that you work with, for them to actually make that strategic difference, are going to be a core part of your business for the next umpteen years. They're going to be working alongside your people, they're going to be delivering, if you've designed it and made it strategically aligned, they're going to be delivering a real business impact to your business on a daily basis. Now, therefore, selecting a partner requires a different set of skills. You may want to write this one down. You cannot select an IT outsource partner through a spreadsheet. It cannot be done. Choosing an IT outsource partner is a lot like choosing a long-term partner in your personal life. Let me just ask a question. Who here has ever been in love? Raise your hand if you've ever been in love. Not many people have been in love. This is going to be an interesting one. Who here is in a long-term relationship? Oh, I've seen some people there who are in a long-term relationship who aren't in love. That's an interesting one.
What do you call long?
Yeah, not in love with themselves. If I I believe that actually it's very interesting. When you've selected your long-term partner, the person you're maybe going out with, boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, did you select them against a predefined list of what you always thought they had to be? They always had to be blonde or tall, or they had to be this, or they had to be that. Or was it something a bit more magical, whereby you found some features in them, some characteristics that you loved, that you never knew you loved before you met them? They brought something to the table, something new, that you didn't expect that you needed or would have liked. But actually, when you now come to it, it's a foundation of your long-term relationship. And more than that, how did you actually select that long-term partner? So, if we selected our personal long-term partners the way we do our outsourced partners, would we have kind of used maybe a boyfriend and girlfriend magic quadrant to try and select our boyfriend or girlfriend or long-term partner? Probably not, because that magic quadrant will probably be funded by the very boyfriends and girlfriends who want to be in that magic quadrant.
Probably written an RFP.
Yeah. Now, or potentially, would you have would you have maybe played 7 or 8 different long-term partners off against each other? Would you have maybe also used an expensive dating advisory firm to help you to kind of run that process? Or would you maybe have spent very little time with them, not really tried to get to know them at all, before you went straight through a process on paper and then signed into a cast iron, cannot get out of marriage from day one? I think most of us would like to think that we spend time with our partners, we get to know them, we go on dates with them, maybe we move in with them, we see whether or not something happens, there's a spark. But more than that, I don't think all of us select our partners based on a set of operational requirements. We don't select them based on the old kind of fascination, good cook, you know, strong, must be a good provider, those kind of more old things. We select people who we think are going to be a good fit for us, who we can trust, who we've got a relationship with, who we think we're going to be able to weather the storms with. And maybe we select partners who we truly believe that us with them are greater together than we are apart. That's what we try and capture within the way we need to source our outsourcing partners. Because it's vital not to select a partner who's basically, your long-term partner you didn't select because they were cheap, did you? You didn't select them because they're going to get cheaper every year. That's not a measure we normally use to select our partners. I know if you come from Yorkshire, that maybe is the case there. But that's not what we do, is it? We select partners because we want to have that long-term connection. And that's the vital thing that you need to do when you source your partners. Now, I think probably some of the key takeaways that we use when we're planning sourcing are, I think the first one would be that we all know this. I'm just going to say it, we'll see whether or not I'm right. Cost is not value. The real value of an outsourcing relationship is not cost savings. And yes, most, as we mentioned earlier, most outsourcing relationships focus on cost as being a key driver because it's an easy measurement. But actually the real value of any outsourcing relationship is the transformative power and the access to skills and the access to elastic resources that you get from an outsourcing provider. And maybe some other things about additional languages and kind of time zones, etc. But those are kind of the key benefits of an outsourcing relationship. If you focused instead on cost, and especially in the way you structure your contract, which I'll come on to in a little while, you go where you focus. If you focus everything on cost, everything will seem too expensive throughout the life of your contract. You will always be arguing about cost, nickel and diamond. If, however, you focus on value, then you get a very different result. I think one of the key principles that myself, I learned from Stephen, and Mark follows it as well, is that in any outsourcing deal that you do, there is one key principle. Everybody has to win, you and the supplier. If you try and do hard-nosed negotiation with the supplier and screw them to the floor, the supplier has to, it doesn't have the ability to then invest in the account. They can't help you through the difficult times. Their willingness to help reduces because they're just being screwed over on the numbers. So you've got to try and create a concept and a sourcing approach where actually it's about creating something which actually is good for both parties. I'll talk more about kind of the approach of how you can create real value later on. But I think one of the key principles that we really like to explore is actually how you can come up with joint account plans with the supplier that you actually work with, where you have a shared common vision, where the supplier making money is not a bad thing. In fact, any clients in the room, primary role of a client with an outsourced relationship is to help the outsourcer make money. Everybody goes, what? That makes a dirty word. No, that's the primary purpose of that relationship. You want to help the outsourcer make money. You want to do that through things like case studies, referrals, partner gigs, standing in front and saying that you like them. It's again a bit like a marriage. You want to stand side by side with your partner and show your love and affection and your loyalty to them. So it's a very different relationship. So we look at do things like joint account plans, whereby it's a shared open targets, whereby you know how you're going to help the supplier to increase their revenues or increase their profits over the year. But likewise, as the client, you're going to share your demand plans and what you're planning to do in terms of transformation and reducing the supplier's costs. It has to be a joint model. So I think that's one of our key principles. I think the other one that I think I will be wary of, I think we mentioned it earlier, is do be aware of the limitations of analyst reports and magic quadrants. Big is not always best. Unless you're working on big global deals, some of the bigger players actually aren't the best fit for you. You want to have a supplier who is going to matter to you and you are going to matter to them. A kind of a David and Goliath scale between a very, very big outsourced firm and you, it's very hard for you to matter to them. So you want to make sure that you try and scale, but not just on culture and fit, but also in terms of a supplier is going to work for you. And if you go to analyst reports, often you're missing some of the niche players who maybe have something which is beautiful and special and ideal for you. And we've done a lot of work to look at how you can actually select suppliers in that way. I think one of the other key features is to be aware maybe of some of these advisor-defined procurement tender contract models, where you think it actually helps speed up your procurement process, but really, because it's very defined, it starves innovation through the process. It's very good for the advisor company who you're helping to build more IPR into their model and they get more data, but really, do you get innovation and do you get greater speed? I would question whether or not you do. I think the other key features are that you also should be aware of the RFP process that I think we spoke about earlier, where it's kind of RFP or RFI, down select, RFP, down select, quibble about some price, deliver the thing. It's very, very time consuming. 5% of all outsourced deals, the cost of those deals for the life of the deal, 5% of the cost of every outsourced deal for the life of the deal is believed to be the cost that every outsourced provider has to bake in to cover the fact that they have to do 4 or 5 deals before they win one. So the cost of the RFP process globally costs every one of our businesses a great deal of money, billions of pounds. And really, does it deliver value? Does it deliver you the due diligence that you expect it to? Yes, it's great that the procurement guy can basically say, well, did we select the guys from the major quadrant? Yeah, we did, well, that's good. And then the CFO can sign off the fact his numbers, and you go through a lengthy process. But if you select your RFP requirements by you sitting in a darkened room, only knowing what you know, and selecting your requirements based upon that, without knowing what the capabilities are in the market, and also what skills there are within those individual companies, then you are only knowing and limiting your solution based upon what you know, not about what everybody else does. Often I think it's better to work on, as I think Mark was talking about earlier, the idea of an RFI-based model, whereby select a few partners who you like, who you think you might want to have a long-term relationship with, then ask their views. And it doesn't have to be prescriptive in the approach. It can be about ideation. It can be about looking at shared outcomes, some of the stuff that David was speaking about earlier on. In fact, if you want to go even further, you can actually be a bit bolder. You can even look at single sourcing. And everybody goes, shudder, no, horror. Well, yeah, you can. And the reason you can actually do that is if you look at the way you're mitigating risk. Stephen and myself have actually developed an approach, and we've kind of taken it further within Velocity, around a single sourcing model which bakes in inbuilt service maturity, so that we know year on year the targets that the supplier has to meet. And we ask the supplier, let's not spend the money on £1 million of you telling me that you're great, let's actually get quickly through to contract, then let's have a maturity target. If you don't hit the maturity target at the end of year 1, you pay for exit, you're out. Your money's where your mouth is. You can't just put a reference client up now. You can't just give us your best client and say, yeah, go and speak to them. They said we're great too. Your money's where your mouth is. It's a very different approach. It's not for the faint-hearted. If you want to speak, and it's not probably the big focus for today, if you want to speak to me about that afterwards, I'd love to kind of give you more details about how we did that. But it's a key focus to say that you don't have to go to the normal RFP process. You don't have to go to the big players. it is worth you challenging the norm and looking at whether or not the process is really adding value to your particular outsourced deal and the requirements and problem you're trying to solve. Because if it isn't, challenge the norm and look at how you then deal with sourcing. So you've selected the right partner and you've aligned your program strategically. That's enough, surely. I mean, that's enough for one day. Well, I think the difficulty is you've still got to ride this tsunami of change. I think it's as Darwin said, you know, it's not the organism which is the largest or fastest or biggest. It is the organism most adaptable to change, which is going to survive. So how do you make sure that this outsourced relationship you've just created is capable of adapting to this tsunami of change that we spoke about? You clearly need to have smart contracts. Now, what do I mean by smart contracts? You need to have contracts which not only are capable of change, but actively thrive and anticipate change. An analogy that I use is that if we look at, say, cloud technology, which is the thing which is actually impacting and changing as one of these drivers of change over the next few years, if we looked at what are the characteristics we love about cloud technology? Well, why don't we take those same characteristics and try and apply them to the way that we want our contracts to be designed? So we want our contracts to be plug and play. We want our contracts to have common APIs between us as the client and each one of the suppliers, so they can be swapped out and interchanged. We want to have clear understanding of unitary charging, so that we know how we can scale up, scale down, and add the new services on the side. And we need a process where we can get from the idea of a change through to it being implemented incredibly quickly as a catalogue service. We don't want to do it whereby the contract merely says you should have commercial change control. The contract needs to be much sharper about understanding exactly the unitary charging model and exactly the approach for how you're going to handle change moving forward. I think beyond that, I think as I mentioned a moment ago, I think the other thing that makes a contract really sing and really live is the fact that don't try and buy a contract which is just cost saving. Try and buy a contract which actually has a purpose and has a goal, even over its lifespan, maybe 4 or 5 years, about where do you collectively try and want to take this service. So that every year you can benchmark and check, are you moving collectively between you and the client, the contract and the service in the right direction? Keep reassessing it against your strategy, keep saying, is this of value? What do we need to change? One of the things that we have developed is we map service maturity and bake that within the contract. So we have a defined model of how every year the service should and will mature. So we've got sort of defined paths and telemetry of how our service will mature over time. So it means that as any change hits from external forces, we know where we're still aiming towards, which I think is vital for the way that you plan your contracts. I think the other things are also looking at how you focus on measures. I think it's vital to try and make sure, we've spoken earlier on about kind of how you look at outcome-based targets. I think it's really important to actually say what things are of value to you, price those. Often within IT we end up, because we can measure everything, we think that that's of value. It's not, it's just data. You've got to look at what things are really going to add value. Now, I don't have time to necessarily give you an overview of the next 3 points in full detail, but I'm just going to quickly take you through them. I think the next key need is you need to be able to adapt. And when I mean that, that means that the client's organisation must also change in its organisation, its processes, its behaviours, and the way it manages the outsource. Most client organisations are not designed to be ready to manage outsourced relationships. They have to adapt to be able to make sure the outsourced relationship actually really delivers value. A lot of the work that we do, again, is to make sure that all client staff and supplier staff are briefed on the contract that's just been signed, and that process is kept up year on year, that everybody understands and instilled the contract, not in legalese and commercial terms, but in the nuts and bolts about what it means and what are the important things that the supplier and the customer must do, not only from a practical, this is the rules of the game, but also in terms of behaviours, in the way that they should speak to clients and suppliers, etc. I think the other item to also look at is your ability to maintain focus throughout the outsource deal, that the contract doesn't just get put on a dusty shelf and you forget some of the nuances that you put in there. The key to that is you need to look at your scoring and your measurement approaches. We do lots of work to try and make sure that we take all the things out of the contract and put them into service and commercial dashboards that then live for the life of the contract. But it also goes beyond there. In fact, you want to look at what things you actually measure and report on. And try and look at not just lagging indicators, which are kind of your left brain operational things that are typical to, say, ITIL. You want to look at things which are more going to make a difference to your business. So we look at kind of business value dashboards for each one of the business's departments, and we also, in particular, use Net Promoter Score, which is the judge that, say, Apple and Sony use to judge customer satisfaction. We use those same measures to judge internal IT departments' satisfaction. We bake that measurement into the suppliers' contracts as well, so we get a single measure of customer satisfaction and improvement, and that's one of the key things that we focus on. I think also to be aware of on measurement though, there are lots of beautiful tools out there, lots of things like Tableau and QuickView, which give you beautiful visualizations of data. Just be aware that they are brilliant, but you can actually be a fool with a tool if you're not careful, because you spend more time kind of coming up with the next beautiful visualization rather than actually what the data that you're seeing actually provides you as knowledge. So that's one thing to be aware of. And lastly, I think the need to grow. Clearly your service must innovate over time. I think one of the key things from us is, it's a bit like, this is in the long-term relationship equivalent. This is the argument that you have over who loads the dishwasher at home. Most outsourced deals that I see, most of the arguments are around the small stuff. They're about request management, they're about how fast you respond to RFSs, they're about the tiny minutiae, which actually gets in the way of really working strategically. We work with both service providers and clients to look and see how we can automate some of those things, using things like ServiceNow or Okta to do provisioning of things, password resets, Bongard to look at remote management, and looking at tooling to really try and remove the commodity level of services so that the suppliers can also concentrate on higher value tasks. But innovation also is around your contractual innovation. I think we spoke earlier on about how you look at gain share models to actually instill innovation. But that actually has to work across all suppliers that you have, and they have to work as an ecosystem. I think, and that's probably one of the key features I think that you have to instill within any contract that you make. Now, hopefully you found the session today useful in terms of giving you an understanding of some of the key principles that we deploy when we're planning a modern and successful outsource relationship. Now, we are planning to have the roundtable event this afternoon, which is also on basically what are the key drivers that we're going to be impacting innovative outsourcing deals over the next few years, and how we actually anticipate them and actually use them to our advantage. It would be lovely maybe to take some of the points that we've gone through here and explore them in more detail with you in that event. But for now, thank you very much everybody for your time.